Hello and welcome to another edition of Conversations from the Edge. Today I have Steve Kalec with me. This has been a long time coming. Steve and I have tried to arrange for this discussion for several months, and we're finally able to line it up. And I'm just thrilled to have Steve with us because we've known each other for well, we won't say how many years, and we go back to AMORC and the Philosophers of Nature, just to give some folks a hint. And I'm just glad you're here. Steve, many of our listeners and viewers have heard your name. They've seen some of your videos, which we're going to get back to, because they are among the only videos that I truly encourage students of practical laboratory alchemy to watch and digest and learn from. And along those lines, Steve, just for those of you who don't know, makes a rosemary tincture that is spectacular. It is much wanted by his friends because truly it is one of those few spagyric products that one drop and you can just feel everything open up. It is just a spectacular product. So I say that from experience as a kind of nod to Steve to remember to send me some, and also for you to take this literally to heart on this, the first day of spring, the beginning of the alchemical year, so that you can learn about the alchemical path with Steve. Steve, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, and hello everyone. Yeah, usually my lab is closed during the winter time, and this is the day I opened it. And it's interesting. I just saw this morning, I have some little friends, that hibernate, these chipmunks. I saw him come out today. He must have been hungry. All winter he was sleeping. And these chipmunks are so smart that they come up my leg and they crawl into my pocket for the peanuts. So I said, well, this must be really springtime since he came out. So I suggested to Mark that I might show you I would give you a little tour of my lab, because a lot of people are interested to see what a contemporary modern alchemist lab would look like. I know I was very interested. I was always fascinated when an alchemist invited me into his lab to see. So allow me to show you. Forgive me if the video is going to be a bit jerky and whatnot, because I'm using my laptop video. So I'm carrying my laptop around. So we will begin, let's say, from where I would come into the lab from the outside. This is what I call the antechamber. It's really my tool shed. I'm not going to show it to you because it's kind of messy. I just want to show you the door. A friend made me this. Can you read it?
Beware what you enter into.
Yeah, and that's pretty Masonic, right? Because that's Masons. When the candidate is entered into the lodge for the first time. So as we come in, we're greeted by the Tree of Life. Very important. Just as astrology is very important for us in alchemy. So let me show off a little bit. Here are some of my glassware that are the longer ones, like condensers and sock slits and tubes and whatnot. These have to be protected because they cost money. So I have cupboards for everything. And as we come in, you see that the floor is checkerboard. This is symbolic of the union of the opposites. Light and darkness, hot and cold, wet and dry, good and evil, and so on. And as we come in, as you can see, I even have a sink that I built in. This is all built by me. Here are some more glasswares. So I'm really serious in my endeavors here. Some of my more exotic glasswares are up on the top. I place them on the top because I don't want to break them. Sometimes they're hard to get. Sometimes you have to get them made. Can you see them?
Yes, very much.
How's the
And your
lighting?
and the Rosicrucian Creed up there, for those who are wondering what that may be, that is the creed of the Rosicrucian Order AMORC. It's very nice. Many of us have a copy of that framed as well.
Yeah. And up there are some more of these glasswares. And coming back here, this is my micro distilling set. Sometimes our end product is so little and we have one more distillation to do. We can't just set up a normal huge distilling set. So a nice micro distilling set comes in very handy. I'm also using my lab as my museum. I have pictures of my events. This is a drama that I wrote, the wedding of the alchemical king and queen. And this was played in San Jose, in the Bacon Hall that they have there. And it was well received. It was also played here in Montreal, in Quebec City, in Ottawa, in Toronto. It's with music, props, and all. Check out my elegant.
Very nice.
I had that made. And there's a course I gave in Ottawa. This was the flyer. So I collect these. These are my memories. Here I have some of my more. Let me go to the other side. Some of my more exotic. This is here it is. Potable gold with rosemary oil.
Beautiful.
I have another one here. This is with cinnamon. I mean, the gold, of course, is real, true gold. It has been first dissolved and passed through the alchemical process, and then it was married with the oil. Both these oils, rosemary and cinnamon, are solar in nature. So they go well with gold being solar. This is one of my finest works. This we call the Stone of Antiquity. It doesn't transmute lead to gold. It's not the philosopher's stone, but it's called the Stone of Antiquity. And it's made with the acacia bark, which I have some here. It's a very exotic and hard to get. It's full of DMT. This has sent me on a 7-hour voyage, spiritual voyage, but fully controlled memory and all. I was even able to stop and measure my blood pressure to see where I'm at and all that. I really did a study on that. And so here we have more of my stuff. This is, I gave this in Los Angeles, International Alchemy Conference in 2011. Can you see it?
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, Patrice was with me there.
Yes, I was not able to attend. For those who don't know, Patrice is Patrice Malazé, and we have a interview with him as well from Conversations from the Edge.
Yeah, I've been to his house a few times. It's a nice guy. And where are we? I can't see what I'm showing. There I am with the Grand Master, Julie Scott. I was the Grand Counselor at that time. This was in La Chute at Le Domaine de Silence. And here, I don't know if you can see it. That's my Masonic Lodge. I'm the master there.
I see.
In the center, and that's my son. I had the opportunity to obligate him and initiate him into the first degree.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, that was a special day. And so here, I was going to start off the distillation of rosemary here, but I can't do it because my water source coming into here is still frozen, because I'm just using a garden hose from my house. And that stained glass window, I made that. A lot of people connected with Otto. but I'm not a member of Auto. This was a lamen used for decades by AMORC. Was a mission
Yes.
order. But in alchemy, it's very, very significant because it's the descent of the Holy, or the Spiritus Mundi into the calcine salts. And that's actually a process that we work in alchemy. You know, the allowing of the salts to deliquesce in the night time. I like to surround myself with a lot of alchemical symbols. I don't know if you can see it there. You see the red
Yes,
line?
I do. Uh-huh.
Red line, the green dragon.
Yes,
Oops.
that's all right.
The philosopher's tree. You know, the little fruits that grow, the philosopher's stone.
The red apples.
Yeah, the red apples, the forbidden fruit. And we have the peacock, important stage in alchemy. And here we have our 5 masters. My 5 masters, sorry. We have Spencer Lewis on the top.
Mm-hmm.
Coming down, we have Manfred. Then we have Rubellus Petrinus. You know him? You've heard of him?
I know of him by name, and I believe I may have exchanged some emails back in the day, but we have never
Yeah.
met.
Yeah, we were good friends. I learned a lot from him, to his forum, to his email. He's passed away now. And there is one of a very favorite guy of mine, Julius Evola. You see him?
Yes.
He's the one who wrote the Hermetic Tradition. I read that book 4 times. I got to read it again. It's so deep with Hermetic philosophy. You were going to say something?
No, I'm just looking at everything. It's wonderful to see. The people don't need to realize what a wonderful opportunity they are to get a look inside not only the laboratory, but also the individuals that you have been associated with, either directly or indirectly, that have made this fruition of wisdom possible, of course, through your own labors.
Yeah, these are my masters, really. Even if they only lived in their books for me, but they're alive for me.
Yes.
And here, of course, we have Jean Dubuis. Am I on? And then we can't forget Carl Jung. And a great Hierophant, Kuthumi.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh, this is wonderful. And for the folks who don't know, Steve really is quite the artist. He has done many spectacular paintings. The stained glass is his. And also, of course, he's a playwright. He's written the mystical drama that he mentioned earlier on alchemy. So he's really just a joy to be with, because he's so well-rounded. So I've got to toot your horn on that one. So just so folks realize just what they're seeing is a tremendous expression of your unfoldment.
Well, thank you a lot. Well, it's been around, it's at least 50 years of study for sure. Here is I'm gonna move around here a little bit. Hard to see that the thing is so small. This is a class I gave in England, if you would believe it or not. I was invited. Here, this is tell me if I'm on it.
You're good.
Manfred Junius.
Yeah, he's right there in the center next to you in blue.
Yeah, Kutna Hora. I'm taking the picture, actually. I'm not there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This was in Kutna Hora, Czech Republic, and that was the castle where we were in. We had the whole castle for ourselves. That was the group. That was 4 days I will never forget. Here, this was given in Quebec. I don't know if I'm on it.
Close, you're close.
This was given in San Jose, California.
Mm-hmm.
In 2017. It is unbelievable how people are interested in laboratory alchemy. And I was given in Ottawa.
And these are nice crowds. This is good. And I
Yeah.
think this is something that we've discussed off and on, and I have with other folks, is the question is, you know, is alchemy or laboratory alchemy, are there more people interested in it? And personally, I believe there are. I believe that there's a tremendous interest in it.
It is. Here's my other stained glass window, the red and white mercury.
Mm-hmm.
That's the little cross on top.
Mm-hmm. Rose Cross.
Yeah. So, in if we look at my lab, this is what it would look like, or what it actually does look like.
And it is a spectacular place, and folks need to realize this has been a lifetime of work and effort and accumulation, that while they should be in awe of it, not to be intimidated by it either, that they can start out in their own way. They don't have to start out big. They can start out at any place along the line.
So, since it's springtime, I usually open up my lab with an experiment. So, you have the privilege of witnessing this. This is eggshells, as you can see. I've cleaned them. I took a long time to collect them. This is going to be the acetate path. And the intent of the experiment is to make a menstruum via the acetate path, which in the end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour the vinegar on top of the eggshells. There's going to be a reaction. That'll take about maybe a week to end. Once it ends, I will distill off the vinegar. I will pour the vinegar off, and I will distill the vinegar, and I will be left with a yellowish liquid, which is called the philosophic wine. After that, I will distill that to receive, actually it's going to be a salt first. From the vinegar, I'm going to distill, it's going to be a salt, and then we're going to dry distill that salt, which will give a yellow liquid, which is called the philosophical wine. After which we distill the philosophical wine, and we will receive the spirit of the philosophical wine. And that spirit is a wonderful menstruum that can be used on plant work, which is more efficient than alcohol, actually. So my intention is to make the vita longa of Paracelsus, which is the extraction of the melissa ends via that spirit, which is really an acetone, but it's a living acetone because the commercial acetones are completely made differently. And so I will be documenting all that. And I'll share it with Mark so he can share it with you. Well, I don't know if you can see the reaction.
Yes, we can see it. It's starting. You see it bubbling.
Pour some more vinegar into it.
And for those of you who are,
This is distilled vinegar, freeze distilled. Yeah, we can see it now.
and for those who are watching or listening for the first time or both, please understand there is a complete introduction and course in alchemy available online. for free at Porta Lucis. It is the Philosophers of Nature coursework. There is also a tremendous amount of information available that Steve has made online through videos on very specific technical work on projects that he has worked on or is working on. So you get to see the beginning, middle, and the end of the work from his laboratory. So we'll have that information available to you as well, so that you can, those of you interested in undertaking the alchemical path, have access to reliable and valuable information.
Well, I don't know if I was able to capture it on my,
Well, we definitely have the beginning process here.
at least you have it.
Mm-hmm.
You can send it to me.
Okay.
All right, so here we go. This is gonna go on for a while. So for the alchemists, this was like a marriage. They didn't call it as a reaction. This was a union. All right, I'm gonna let this go. I'm gonna open the window a bit because it's starting to be very pinning.
And this will go for about a week before the process moves on to the next stage.
Yeah, it's gonna slow down.
Mhm.
And once it stops, I'm gonna filter off the vinegar. And then I'm gonna either evaporate it slowly or distill it off. I think I'll evaporate it. And then I'll be left with a salt. And that salt, like I say, I'm gonna put it into a retort. What a retort, this is a retort.
Yes.
The salt into a retort. Then I'm gonna dry distill it. I'm gonna heat this dry powder and a yellow liquid will come out of it. They call that the aqua photons, the stinking water. And from that stinking water, I'm gonna distill it again to receive, that stinking water is actually a philosophical wine. And from that philosophical wine, I'm gonna distill this, it's spirit of philosophical wine. And that spirit can still be distilled again to rectify it even more. And some call it the ardent's water or whatever. So.
And it's a tremendous amount of work.
It is.
And which leads us to the question, how did you get interested in alchemy? And what keeps you going after all these years?
It's a passion. It becomes a passion. What keeps me going is because of the connection. This is what a lot of alchemists don't understand. We have the strictly laboratory alchemists who don't want to know nothing about spirituality. Then we have the strictly spiritual alchemists who don't want to know nothing about laboratory alchemy. One thinks the other one is nuts, they're quacks. But a true alchemist will see the correspondence between the outer work and the inner work, as above, so below. Nicholas Flamel has told us so many times, has written about it, he said that what wonderful events transpire in our vessels. How can we be not in wonderment of them? And it is true. It becomes, laboratory alchemy becomes a spiritual work because it connects you with your inner process. It's the same process. A circulation, like here, for example, you see This is my circulatory setup here. You see this?
Yes. Mhm.
This is my
Yes.
circulatory setup. This is a setup where we want to marry substances, like an oil and a spirit and so on. It helps to bring them together. And it also raises its vibration. And it also allows it to capture the planetary influences of the day. Because what happens is that as it goes to every sphere, the elixir expands and then expands again and expands again, opens up. It increases the molecular activity, and then it comes back. So this way, our elixir sent up into heaven. And then it comes back down again, newborn, as Hermes has said. That's exactly what we do when we do the microcosmic circulation within us. We start from the bottom and we go up and we open up. If we're lucky enough, we can go out, expand consciousness. And then we bring it back in. And then we do it again. Go up, open up. A wonderful feeling. And you bring it back in. And eventually, if you become good at it, eventually you will start to feel an up. As it comes down, the bottom starts to work on its way up because it's anticipating it. And then what you have a circulation, and that is such a beautiful event when when you're lucky enough to reach that point. So for me, laboratory shows me my inner process. You know, it's all one and the same thing. The laws are the same, whether they are the alchemical process, I should say, is one. It's universal to all levels of being, be that physical, be that spiritual, be that psychological. It's universal.
Now, you were very fortunate in that your principal instructors, if I understand correctly, in laboratory alchemy were Manfred Junius, who wrote, did he write more than one book?
I'm not sure. The only one I'm familiar with is Plant Alchemy, and then it came out as a second edition, Spageria, something like that. But it's the same book.
Okay, and
but he might have written something else.
Well, and he and then of course Jean Dubuis. Maybe you could comment for. I mean, it's unfortunate, but here we are, and it is 20 years later, and while there are many people who are interested in alchemy, I'm surprised at practical alchemy. That is, I'm increasingly surprised how many people who don't understand some of these luminaries who have helped make this possible in the 20th century. Frater Albertus, Manfred Junius, Jean Dubuis. There are others out there, but these are the three principal ones who we tend to run into most often, and for very good reason. Maybe you could comment a little bit on both these guys and what they were like.
Well, they were quite different. I respect them both equally. Junius was very easygoing. He was down to earth, and he was friendly with you. He came down to your level. Dubuis, he commanded much more respect, you know, and authority. But that's understandable because Junius was never part of an esoteric organization or an order. He was strictly a spagerist. Although he had a degree in Ayurvedic medicine and so on, but he never really was into spiritual alchemy. And that's how we became good friends. On our very first meeting, when they found out that I was a Rosicrucian, he would constantly ask me questions about their teachings, and it really interested him to see that, to hear about it. And he actually asked me to give an hour presentation on spiritual alchemy at his seminars, all of them. You know, I always had to prepare something. So we were good friends on that.
Dubuis, well, he was a Rosicrucian, he was a Martinist, a Kabbalist, he wrote, he was the founder of the Philosophers of Nature, and the lessons that he wrote on spagyrics and mineral alchemy is oh my God, it's a treasure to have. And can you imagine, it's out there, public domain,
Yeah. And all you have to do is just think of what we went through. We had to right away send a check, and then they would send us a stack of paper. It wasn't always even punched for a loose leaf binder, right? We'd get this stack of paper, and we paid a fair amount of money for it given the time, and we were grateful. We were grateful that we could get this. And then later on, it became nicely bound, but it was still relatively expensive given the labor involved and everything. Now we didn't care. Well, sure, send it cost. That
doesn't matter.
Absolutely nothing.
We were happy we could get our hands on it.
We were grateful. And now all you have to do is hit download and it comes to you in a PDF.
Yeah. But those were, but still, the seminars, pond seminars, we were fortunate to be able to attend to that. Those are days I will never forget. Fun we had. You remember the Jean Dubuis treated us to a Martinist kind of a sacrament where we drank some of his resurrected gold.
Yes.
It was given in wine. It was a Martinist ritual that we all drank from the cup. Remember? That was solemn. That was very nice.
The one I missed that I heard about was when he brought over a horsetail tincture, I guess that had been sitting forever, and someone took a few drops of it and they said, "Oh my God, I'm blind."
I missed that one too.
I missed that.
It's strange. Yeah. They both left their mark on me. Junius was a fantastic teacher, fantastic for lab and spagyrics and everything else. I'll give you an example. There is a man who wrote a book, I don't want to mention his name, and he argued with many of us that an alchemical tincture or a spagyric work with plants is not alchemical if the plant does not undergo putrefaction. So with Junius, we were doing spagyric, we were doing a rosemary tincture. And what we did there, we didn't allow the plant to putrefy. We just poured the rectified mercury on it, which is the alcohol, of course. So I asked Junius, I said, this guy, you know him. And he says, yeah, I know. He wrote a book and he says this, that it's not alchemical until a plant dies, experiences the death through putrefaction. So how can what we're doing now be alchemical? So he looked at me and he said, well, this goes to show you how much this guy knows about alchemy. He says, where does the mercury come from? The vegetable mercury, which is the alcohol. So I say, well, from wine. And where does the wine come from? So, well, from grapes. And where does the grape come from? So I say, well, from the vine. He says, yes. So what happened to the wine to get the alcohol? Well, or the grape juice, sorry. Where did the wine come from? Grape juice. What happened to the grape juice, which is the plant itself, right? The grape juice. I said, well, it fermented. Yeah, and is that not a putrefaction? He says, yeah, I guess, Did not the wine, the grapefruit, the grape juice, did not the grape juice undergo a conversion? Did it not die to its old self? Did it not resurrect as wine on a higher level? Grape juice, you can last on a table for 2-3 days and it'll go sour on you, it'll die. Wine will last, maybe 100 years if it's capped, longer time. And where did the mercury come from? I say, well, from the wine, and that is eternal. It'll never go bad on you, right? So did not the mercury experience the death through the wine? Did not the wine die and the grape juice die and resurrect as wine? I say, yeah. So he says, when you pour this rectified alcohol, which is resurrected and is eternal, onto your plant, what do you think happens to the plant? It will experience the death as the mercury did, because the memory is in the mercury. It'll kill that. It'll die. The rosemary herb will die and will release its soul. You know? So this is the knowledge that he had. You know, he was able to answer questions so quickly. So I really respected him for that. Junius would also get down with you, and he'd mortar. He'd mortar with you. He'd work, you know, and tell stories to you while he's working with you. You know, what did Jean Dubuis do? He sat back, let the others work, and he was sipping his red wine. Remember? And he would constantly tell us, "This is Tikaret." Remember that?
I remember one conference. It was maybe 10 o'clock in the morning or 10:30 in the morning, and they're all, you know, they all have cups with them. They're up lecturing, and I said, "What's that?" I said, "Was it coffee?" He goes, "Yeah, French coffee," and it was their all red wine. But I wanted to step in here, and as funny as this sounds, they were never drunk, and
No,
you know,
no.
the art here was that there was in tantra, the same thing occurs if you have the right attitude. Because I've done it myself, that's when I first started drinking red wine, is there was a really powerful transformative effect that took place. And I can say that as a speaker. And I mean, you know what I'm talking about because you remember that ritual experience. And for someone like myself who never drank, who really small threshold for alcohol, to be able to consume that much wine as I was and not have ill effects and feel this expansive effect, something was going on that was truly alchemical, transformative, that if you had told me this, I would have said, you're just making it up. It would be very difficult to believe without experiencing it directly. And with that, Jean would make the story. I remember he said that about Paracelsus. And when you read about Paracelsus, he really didn't write books. He dictated them. And his secretary said he would come home late at night after having drank a tremendous amount of wine, and suddenly he would dictate the most stunningly lucid and clear presentations. So you know, we're laughing and we're having a good time, but there's kind of an inside story here that I want the listeners to know. There's something else going on that was very fascinating.
Well, you know, I actually wrote a paper on the importance of wine in alchemy. I sometimes share it. There's over 2,000 compounds in wine. That some of these compounds haven't even been yet fully studied by science. And truly, wine is very solar in nature. You know, like you said, is this expansive feeling. You can come home from work in a bad mood, have a glass of wine, it cheers you up, it lifts your spirit, you know, it gives you energy. And to me, let's not forget, it's an alchemical process. For the grape juice to have become wine is a natural alchemical process. So, and you know, Jean Dubuis, well, he was French. What French don't like wine? I like wine myself. It used to be my hobby. I used to make lots of wine. You know, I used to have a nice wine cellar, but it's so much work. Now I buy it, but they're not as good as the homemade wines. You know?
Well, Jean, I remember, as you said, he would sit there and it goes direct from Tiferet. He would direct, but it worked.
Yeah. He was special in his own way. I was fortunate. I was able to talk to him 3 months before he passed away. I was at Patrice's home, you know.
Yes.
We were doing something. Oh yeah, we were doing the dry path again. We were continuing on the dry path. This was after you guys, we met there, you remember?
Yes, I remember. That was about
And,
14 years ago.
yeah, that was a long time ago. And Jean-Dupuis called Patrice, and Patrice was busy with something. His hands were full and whatnot. He gives me the phone. Here, talk to him, he says. So I was stuck talking to him, you know, but I know French, so I speak French. I was so happy to be able to talk to him because I was able to thank him for his teachings. And I told him how much I appreciated them and how much it was a blessing for me to be able to know him and all this. And he was so happy for me saying that, you know, and he told me some things, you know, and 3 months later, he passed away.
I know that he was, those who didn't have the direct physical contact with him or people like him, because there are occasionally, if you're very fortunate in your lifetime, you'll meet one, maybe two people like that. And that's very fortunate. That's a profound blessing. And yeah, that's all we can say about it.
Yeah. In you know, you have to evaluate your lifetime. You know, you've had a span of life, and in that span, you had the blessing, the opportunity. This was given to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm sorry I missed Alberto's, but at least I knew Jean Dubuis and Manfred Junius. And these, you'll never forget these contacts. They become part of you, right? You even have dreams with them and whatnot. You know, it's they were really special.
And we talk about that, and for the listeners who are listening in, they hear about these kinds of things often, or they read about them, but it's the tone is different. You know, this isn't something sensational. We're not saying this really for your benefit. You're kind of eavesdropping in on this conversation between Steve and myself in many ways, and please take that to heart. That when we encourage you to undertake these studies and these practices, it's because we have personally experienced a life-changing, a life course direction changing benefit from it that we almost don't even have words to express. At least I don't.
Yeah. So it's quite something.
Yeah, he was quite the character too. But your experiences too, you had experiences with these great fellows. We knew a lot of wonderful folks through Philosophers of Nature. And what was interesting too is not only was it Albertus that acted, at least in the United States, as a focal point for many of these people, but the Rosicrucian Order, AMORC as well, which you showed some photographs of earlier of your presentations there. We met through, we had the common connection, as did many people back in the day. AMORC played a significant role in the 1940s, and then later on again in the 80s with keeping laboratory alchemy alive. What role has AMORC played in your path, in your journey?
Well, AMORC, it was the beginning for me. I was 21 years old. Yeah, I was 21 years old, and at work we had a conversation, and somebody mentioned the word Rosicrucian Order. And just hearing the word, ding, a bell rang in my head, a light bulb lit up. I never heard the word before, or I never read about it either, but the way it sounded, I realized I know this word, you know, and something inside of me told me, do not procrastinate. And that evening, I sent them information that I wanted to join. Like I say, I was 21 years old, and the monographs blew me away instantly. You have to, I have to say something here. I have to express that as a child, I was already a very, I would say, as I reflect back, I was quite domestic. You know, I would make deals with God. You know, I would, you know, covenants. I would make covenants with God. When I was in trouble and I needed help very badly, I would tell him, you know, fix this for me, and I'll plant a cross for you in the woods. You know? Because I remember the story of Jacques Cartier, who came here. They were dying of hunger and freezing to death, and he prayed to God, saying that if they can make it through winter, he's going to plant a huge cross for him on Mount Royal there, and he did. So that I was a kid when I learned that story, you know, and I was raised by the Catholics in the 1950s, you know, early 60s. It was still the church, nuns, and that taught us. So religion was kind of beaten into me. Plus, I had a mother who beat the fear of God into me. You know, she was very religious. But I'm glad I grew up like that, because it rendered me into a mystic. I used to say good night to every saint that I knew before I went to sleep. And here now, in retrospect, I'm realizing that in my own unconscious little infant way, childish way, I already had a sense of a hierarchy within me, you know, because these saints all represented something, you know, he was good for that, he was good for this.
Yes.
So it's a kind of a, as we project on these saints, we're projecting qualities from ourselves onto them, right? And so I was already doing all this as a child. So when I received the monographs from the Rosicrucian Order, they resonated with me instantly. I mean, I was blown away. We used to receive 4 monographs a month, all on the same day, and they would tell us to read one a week. I couldn't wait. I read them all, you know. I still did the exercises and all that. And then I quickly joined the lodge, the local lodge. I did everything, from temple custodian to guardian to chaplain to chairman of the board, master. I became regional monitor, and then I became grand counselor for several years. So the order, you know, was a big part of my life. You know, I just received my 50th anniversary certificate. So you know, and as I became regional monitor and grand counselor, well, these things demanded presentations, because you'd be invited here and there, give presentation. So a lot of research had to be done. And in this research, I learned, I was forced to learn and all this. So giving presentations, I think I learned more than the person to whom I was giving it to, you know. So Rosicrucianism was a big part of my life. And then, of course, eventually you feel within yourself that the very true and real order is the invisible order of the heart. That leaves a mark on you, you know. I believe that mark was with me already from my past life, you know, and it will stay with me forever and for eternity, because it's a mark. It's there's no better word for it than that. I'm indebted to the Rosicrucian Order. They really made me who I am. And it is through them that I found alchemy. First, I found Carl Jung through them, because they referenced him a lot. And through Carl Jung, I bought most of his collected works, and especially the alchemical ones, Psychology and Alchemy, Alchemical Studies, and Mysterium Coniunctionis. You can never read that. You have to reread. It's so in depth. But at least through Jung, I was able to know how to interpret the symbols of the alchemical elements. He really shed a lot of light on that. And then not only did they introduce me to Jung, but once I used to go to the RCU classes, the Rosicrucian University classes. It became my mecca. And having worked for Air Canada, I used to get free tickets, free flights, standby, mind you, but they were free. And I used to go every summer. And one year, Art Compound, you know.
No, I remember Art. Yes. Yeah.
He was giving a week class, 1 week class, but it was just in the afternoon, you know, from I think 1 o'clock till 5. It was a full 5-day course on laboratory alchemy.
That was the mid 80s.
Yeah.
I remember because I had signed up to go to the alchemy class, and Jack Glass and someone else, and it wasn't Russ, it was someone else. Name is I'll find it and I'll share it with you. It was a fellow from the Chicago area who also knew Albertus. He was supposed to teach the course, and German fellow from Chicago area, supposed to teach it. Something happened, and I guess Art stepped in to replace them as the instructor on the course, either that year or the year earlier. That's how I remember.
Okay.
I'm just saying, that's how I remember the details around it. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And so he gave a wonderful course, and that's where I met him. And it's Art Compound who introduced me to the philosophers of nature. And then the very first class that I went, or seminar that I went with Manfred Junius, lo and behold, there's Art Compound. You know, so we became great friends. And then after that, we met at every seminar that Junius gave. He came to my house 3 times. I visited him in Denver. So we were good friends with Art. We phone each other once in a while. And then another RCU class was, I went on a Kabbalah class. Actually, that was before Art Compound. At that time, I was already heavily into spiritual alchemy. So I went to a Kabbalah class given by Roy McCormick. You remember him?
I remember Roy, yes.
Great guy. I'll tell you a little story about that. But first, let me say this. Somehow in the class, the subject was Saturn and lead. And somehow the conversation came into the transmutation of lead to gold, you know? So I happened to say, yeah, but that's spiritual, right? That's the unconscious to light, you know, Saturnian aspect into the solar aspect and so on. So he said, yeah, you're right. Go ask, he says, the teacher next door is giving a class on this and that. Go ask him, where did he get his ring from? He says, he made it here in our laboratory, you know? So that blew me away. I said, what? You mean to tell me it's true? You know, because at that time I didn't believe yet in physical transmutation. I was what they called a strictly spiritual alchemist. And I went after the class was over and his class was over. I went to see him. Forget what his name was. And I said, you know what? Excuse me. Mr. McCormick here asked me to ask you, where did you get your ring from? So he looks at me and he looks over to Roy McCormick with a stern face, you know, like I saw that he was annoyed. And like he didn't want to talk about it, that, or that Roy gave away a secret or something like that, you know. Yeah. And I said, you know, and then a rescue came. Somebody came in, asked him a question, and somehow the conversation switched, and I was able to get away. So that's when I realized, holy mackerel, I need to get into a lab. You know, I need to get a lab. And then the following year, Art Compound gave the class, initiated me into laboratory work. But coming back to Roy McCormick, these people, you know, sometimes you meet the right person at the right time. I had an experience one time. I was a very disciplined practitioner of the overall exercise.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Every day I did it, every day. And especially when I went to sleep, I would do it. And I would really feel, the first time I really got to that exercise, felt that exercise, did it, I said, holy moly, there's something in this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to continue with this. Anyway, about a year after I started, I fell asleep doing it. I went to bed maybe around 11 o'clock and I was doing it, and then I fell asleep. And around 2 o'clock, doing 2 a.m., I kind of wake up and I'm still doing the exercise.
Mm-hmm.
I'm buzzing. I could feel the zzz, my
Mm-hmm.
atoms buzzing. Everything was buzzing. And so I think to myself, holy moly, I better stop, and I couldn't stop it. I was in that paralyzed state,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't stop it. And I'm yelling to my wife, but nothing comes out. I say, try to come and wake me up. Here I am fully conscious, but in a dead zone for the body. So
Sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
Self-induced.
Self-induced, but conscious, fully conscious. Because I was saying, I have to stop the exercise. So as I can't stop it, I realize the seriousness of something here. I yell out in my mind, oh my God, take care of me. And as I say this, all of a sudden to my right, there's a figure standing there. From what I remember, he had like a white robe, blonde hair. The light about him was so intense that I couldn't make out the face. And he bends down over me and he goes like this. I understood immediately what he wants to do. He wants to snap me out of it. He goes, and I say to him, no good. I say, you have to move me. So he bends down, lifts me up, not my body,
Mm-hmm.
my consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and he puts me back in. And with this, vibrations quickly coming down, I'm back, I'm alive. Now, for a very long time, I kept asking myself, who was that person that came to help me? Who could it be? And I had related this to McCormick, and McCormick said, well, when I asked him, I said, who do you think that was? And look, that guy knew instantly, and I believe him. He said, who did you ask for help? I said, God. He says, yes. When you ask God, the divine, it's your divine self that comes and helps you.
Mm-hmm.
What had projected out of me was my higher self. And this higher self came to show me, look, we're separated. Look, understand this now. And it was him, as he put me back down, it was my consciousness, my higher consciousness coming back into me. That was an explanation I would have never been able to come up with without Roy McCormick. So in that sense, AMORC, the Rosicrucians, great part of my life. Like I say, they made me who I am.
I think for the listeners who don't understand or don't familiar, RCUI was Rosicrucian University International. It was a series of courses that took place during the summertime every year in San Jose, California. There were occasional off-campus programs, but the principal courses were in San Jose. These were really significant courses that started, I believe, back in the 30s, and tremendous amount of work was done with students and various instructors. And what Steve is saying here also I can relate to, because in my experience with AMORC, it was not just the lessons that were significant, but being involved with an organization and a group that gave me responsibilities in which whether it was the administrative responsibility or the ritualistic or both, and that there's a tremendous amount of growth as a person that came through that. And again, moving through into the different roles, including regional monitor, but the presentation, having to get up in front of people and prepare and to speak and to answer questions. this may seem very mundane to someone, but it was a tremendous personal growth experience for myself. And I can't look to any organization. I'm sure they're out there. I mean, Masonry is an example of that as well, but not quite on the same way, that allows you, if you really throw yourself into it, at least at that time, to really grow. And that had to do with the lodges and the affiliated bodies and being involved with other people on this journey, on this path.
Yeah, for sure. And also one of the great strengths of the Rosicrucian order is its egregore. You know, the order has a kind of a collective energy that bonds all its members together in a beautiful, loving way. That egregore was a force that you feel all the time. You know, that's why I say that it leaves a mark on you, kind of. But its teachings were the best. The old monographs, I don't know about the new monographs. I haven't looked into what they're like, but the old monographs were authentic. The ones written by Spencer Lewis.
Yes, that's the ones we're referring to.
Yeah.
But let's not comment on something that might be difficult for folks to grasp. That was a tremendous experience and a tremendous time, and it's allowed us to be here today. I think this is one of the things we're trying to say, that these movements, these forces, these organizations that moved forward through the 20th century, it's like a giant wave, and you know, and it hits that shore, and now it's 2022, and we're seeing the impact of that wave. We may not see the wave anymore because it's pulled out to the ocean, so to speak, but we're seeing the impact of the wave on the shore. And we're seeing people interested in alchemy, and they wonder where to go. And of course, we direct them to the lessons, but lessons aren't always enough. It's individuals to help them learn. You're one of those individuals that they can learn from. And as they do this and as they progress, we say what happens as the awakening takes place. They awaken to as much as I don't like the term, the inner master, the inner self, they awaken to that. And that will also lead them into further contact with people who can help them progress in their laboratory work, and their ritual work, and their meditative work, if they're open to it.
Definitely. You are definitely guided by these inner forces that you awaken. These, you know, the latent forces of the soul within. Yeah. Seek and you shall find.
Yeah.
Knock and it shall be opened unto you. Yeah. Ask and you shall receive.
Now, what do you consider some of the benchmarks that a budding alchemist should look for, or maybe some advice you can give the budding alchemist in terms of their inner journey? What should they direct their attention towards to maybe become more aware of?
Well, first he should love the divine within him. He should love it as he sees it in nature. He should realize the divinity within himself, you know, and he should know what he's seeking for. You know, if you're seeking for gold making, good luck. You know, I'm not saying it can't be done or whatever, but we have to remember that the ability to transmute lead to gold is a mark of an attainment, of a power received through the other side, spiritual alchemy. So he should at least know that the alchemical process is a universal process on all levels of being. He should understand the hermetic law of correspondence of as above, so below. You know, I've seen so many fights between, I think I mentioned that, so many fights between the spiritual and the physical alchemists, practical alchemists, that should be avoided at all times. He should love the Hermetic writings. There's, for me at least, they're some of the most beautiful writings in the world, elevating, spiritual. He should understand that in the laboratory, at all times, he is in the crucible with his matter. And what is transpiring to the matter, he should know that it will transpire within him. You know, what else can I say? What I really mean by this, that he is at all times within his crucible, is that some of the spiritual events that can transpire in man can be shown in the laboratory. You know, like I said, when Flamel says such wonderful events transpire in our flasks, we can prove these esoteric principles in the laboratory. I don't know, I don't have a picture of it here, it's upstairs in my room. You remember the swan, my swan, from the wet path of Artephius?
Yes, I do. I remember that. That was spectacular.
Well, I challenge anybody to generate such a swan as that one, with its wings open,
yes,
like that, over the black matter, and as Alchemy Unveiled, Helmond said that from the frequent ascension and descension of the spirit, going up and down into the matter, and out of your matter evolves a white spiritual body, a pure white swan. You know? And you know, I anticipated the white swan, because in the literatures, it doesn't call it the white swan. It doesn't even refer to the white swan. But when I saw a white crust layer starting to form itself, I said, this is gonna be the white swan that the alchemists talk about, you know? And I kept incubating it, and I kept circulating it. I could see the salts rising with the spirit and dropping back down, rising and dropping back down. And as it kept rising and dropping, it formed this swan. Now, I have to tell you, and to our viewers, that in that path, we introduced the secret fire to antimony, which is this eternal aspect, the black matter. It's full of life, antimony. Antimony is the richest mineral in the world. It's a double, it's not just a mineral, it actually, it's neither a mineral nor a metal, it's a metalloid. So it has a special fire, it has a special life. And to activate that life, we have to add the secret fire, to know where the secret fire comes from. Well, that secret fire is actually from the alchemist's own urine. Urine. Now, there's a way to distill urine, to get the spirit of urine, and then so on. And I had introduced that into the black matter, and I mixed it all up like that. So the fire principle was there. But what else was there in there? My DNA was in there. Because in your urine, you have your DNA, you have all kinds of stuff in there that belong to you. Stuff from your immune system and all kinds of things. But the important thing was that my DNA was in there. And as I was anticipating this and nurturing it, and making sure the heat is constant and never falls and never rises, this was really growing. And then one day, according to the literatures, at this point, raised the heat a little bit. So I raised the heat a little bit. And one evening, I came into the lab to look at it. And I said, holy mackerel, look at this, the white swan. It's there. I was just able to take a picture. You know, I went back into the house. I came back about an hour or two later to look at it. Well, the swan had flown. What I mean by that, it sublimated. into vapors, and it was distilled over because I had it in a retort. It distilled over. And this was the celestial water of Artephius. So the white swan was what became the celestial water of Artephius, and this water is actually a living antimony trichloride. So, and that dissolves gold, you know, in a friendly way, not using acids or corrosives and so on. So here, this was purely spiritual. My creation of the swan was purely my interaction, my psychic interaction with the laboratory experiment. And this is how alchemists worked, because to them, they didn't have chemicals. Chemicals didn't exist to them. All that existed to them was spirit, soul, and body, mercury, sulfur, salt. When I say mercury for our viewers, it's not the metallic mercury. Mercury is used as that which is the most volatile part of a substance, like for example, alcohol for grape. The soul would be the oil of a plant is its soul, because it's its characteristic, it's its virtue, it's its healing source. Every oil of every plant is different, but every mercury from every plant is the same mercury. Once alcohol is rectified 7 times, you can't tell where it came from. But yet the sulfur, the soul of the plant, the oil, you can tell in a dark room. This is rosemary. This is this. This is that.
Mm-hmm.
So it proves it that the soul is individual and our spirit is universal. You know? And then you have the salt, which is the purified body. And once you have these 3, you can make a lot of things, elixirs, plant stones, and whatnot. But my point is that that's all they had is chemicals. Otherwise, after this, they had fire, air, earth, and water. So with these 7 things, they did all these things. They didn't have chemistry then. It was purely a philosophical work for them. And if you want to be an alchemist, you have to put yourself in that frame of mind that the alchemists were in. You know, a lot of alchemists now are chemists. You know, and then some of my works have been discredited by chemists. You know, they don't understand that this is energetic medicine. It's not this chemical. It's not made the way you would make it. It's made alchemically. But to them, everything is chemistry. You know, so if someone wants to be an alchemist, he has to put himself in that frame of mind. He should read. He should read the Hermetic literatures. There are so many of them. You know, wonderful literatures. The golden tractates of Hermes and so on. The watershed stone and so on. There's so many literatures. You go on Adam McLean's website, you can download. They're all there. These should be read. You know, not just I'm going to make this. I'm going to make that. Yeah, we all try. You know, but above all else, first and foremost, alchemy is a philosophy. That's I don't know where I got that statement from, but I'll never forget it.
Well, that philosophical view is the foundation. And it's very easy now for many people to, what do you mean the philosophical view? What do you mean? We see so much esoteric and occult literature and self-help stuff published and sold, and the language treats it almost as if it's like flipping a switch. You know, visualize this, do that, and everything is going to be fine, or you'll get what you want, or what have you. But it's called the great work, and that great work of inner transformation. And the first thing we have to transform is our view of ourself in relationship to the cosmos. You know, it doesn't mean it's a perfect understanding. No, the understanding is what evolves, but we need a philosophical view that allows for that unfoldment to take place, for that realization to take place. And we see that really perfectly described in the very short series of books known as the Corpus Hermeticum. And it says, you know, if you can make yourself unto a god if you want to, but if you imagine yourself and shut yourself up and say, I know nothing, I am nothing, then what can you do? For like is known by like.
absolutely.
So we're constantly identifying with our greater potential, our greater possibilities, and bringing them into some level of realization.
Yep. It's a wonderful philosophy. Once Lady Alchemia gives you a kiss, you'll never forget it. And she is a possessive mistress. She will never let you go. I mean, there have been times when I, did so much work, so much study that, I had it. I was saturated. I had indigestion. I would quit. I said, oh, didn't take long. Month, I was back at it. It calls you back. Most 2 months break, and then it just calls you back. It's a passion.
She's an expensive girlfriend.
She is. High maintenance. Yeah.
High
Very
maintenance.
Yeah. But she can be loving. She can. She's a good girlfriend to have for sure. And once you become philosophically minded like this, you start to understand things in a different way. Like just I think last night. The song by the Beatles, I am he as you are me, and we are all together, the Walrus there, or whatever it's called. Well, I don't know if he knew exactly what he's singing, but I had a kind of a meditation, and I had a thought coming up to me, and I realized that every living person in the world is an aspect of my being. Now you say that just like that, people say, "Oh, what's he talking about?" But here's my my philosophy on this. Here's my thinking on this. If I see something in somebody, I don't like it in him. I say, what an idiot. Or what is it I'm really doing? I'm projecting something from myself onto him. It's really what I see in him is I see myself. So is he not part of me already? In that sense, whether it's good or bad, every person has a quality that I have also, or that I hate, or I don't like it because I haven't, And I think 7 billion of us that we are, so many parts, so they are all part of me. We are all together in this one sense. So I don't know if this makes sense to you, but if I recognize something in somebody that is in me, well, he's an aspect of my being. He's carrying it. He's like me.
Well, we all have the archetypal potential, say just to keep it simple, of the 7 planets, we'll say.
Yeah.
And this person over here has a highly developed solar quality. Well, maybe we don't have a well-developed solar quality, so we don't like that in them. Or someone has
or we can admire him very much.
Or we can, if it's something we want, that's the other aspect. We can look at that and say, okay, maybe I don't like that about him, but maybe I should develop it. Maybe there's something about him that I should. What's the positive qualities that I'm ignoring? And how can I bring more of my solar qualities out and see the goodness?
Right. To become conscious of what he's conscious of.
Yeah.
Because it's in us too, just that we're unconscious of it. Yeah, I understand that. You had asked me the other time a question about what other qualities that are non-esoteric that I developed, that I would have developed that outside of the practice of esotericism. What study and practice would I say that is good or important? Something like that. Yes. So I'll answer it now, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah. Would you say Jungian psychology is inside esoterics or outside esoterics?
I think Jungian psychology is kind of like religious mysticism. It hangs on two fields. So
Because I was going to say Jungian psychology, because that greatly helped me to understand the symbols of the esoteric literatures.
Mhm.
But like I say, it's a borderline, like you say. The study of mythology,
Yes.
that's another wonderful study that one can have to learn the stories, at least, the allegories that they represent, and the metaphors. For example, the labors of Hercules,
Mhm.
Prometheus, or Ariadne's tread, but there's so many. That's another, I would say, outside practice. Would it be? Maybe.
Mhm.
I'm a black belt in karate.
Discipline.
I got it.
Congratulations on that. Yes, I
I got
remember
it
seeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of concentration, lots of discipline. That helps in our work, I guess. There's one thing though that really also left a mark on me. It's the writings of Uspensky and Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff's fourth way. It's kind of esoteric, but not your standard type of esotericism. It's about the study of your own self, analyzing yourself. Why did you think this? Why are you doing this? And so on. That it's a way, it's a path. And he said that if we go by this, if we do this, we will realize that we're not what we think we are, that there is another someone in you. And that and I mean, it was an interesting read, but then one day I experienced what he meant. I was working midnight shift at Air Canada. I was a mechanic. I was still young, maybe 25 years old. I was very hungry around 2 o'clock, and I went to the vending machines, and I said, oh, I got to have a bite of something, and I look and I said, I'm going to have that snack bar, and I'm going to have a glass of milk with it. And I look a little over and no, maybe I'll have this can of beans with a sandwich. Then I look over. Oh no, maybe a good smoked meat sandwich. Nah, let's have the snack bar and the milk. That's what I feel like. No. Let's go for the beans. And here I was with the coins ready to buy some. And I was battling with myself what I wanted, and that's when I realized that my ego here has splintered into three. I wouldn't say personalities, but it splintered into three. One wanted this, one wanted that, one wanted this. And they couldn't decide because they were fighting amongst themselves. And that's when I realized, holy mackerel, are we all like this or what the heck? How many of you are in me, and so on. Okay, I understand it's all one, but splintered. But it kind of scared me, like it was scary, because it is a kind of a separation, consciousness looking at himself. And that's when I said, okay, I'm going to decide. It's almost 3 o'clock. We'll go upstairs. We'll have 2 eggs with toast and nice coffee, just so that we centralize back everything and not you. So Uspensky's books are very, 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 they should be read. Gurdjieff's fourth way should be read too. And that's the, when we study alchemy, we also learn about the alchemical separation, that without the separation, there is no alchemical process. That is the most important thing that happens. And that's what it is. The separation is such an important thing that there's an aspect of your consciousness that separates out, and it can actually see yourself to such a point that it can distinguish between the two. And this can be a schizophrenic event. It is a schizophrenic event in a sense, but a controlled one, This separation is also the torment of the conscience, for example. There's a part of you that torments you. That's a separation again. So we think that we are what we are, but we are much more complex than that. That there are hierarchies in us. They're all part of us, but they're like the Godhead, for example, and so on. So this is how deep
in psychosynthesis, it's called subpersonalities. There's these variety of sub aspects of ourself that we're not always aware of, or they may be aware of them in crisis or a dream, or sometimes they splinter out. And really at that time, like you said, I want this, and then it says, no, I want this, and it says, no, I want that. And you're wondering, where's this coming from?
Yeah.
And then we get an insight, because then we may want something so dramatically different from our day-to-day notion of self that it can be frightening.
Yes. And I've had that experience where you hear a voice telling you to do something that you'd never dream of doing. Where the hell is that coming from?
Yeah.
And that's scary. And then it haunts you to the point that it actually tells you, you're not going to escape me. You're going to do it. You're going to do it. And that's when you really need help, in that sense that you can't give in here. You have to realize why you're hearing this, why you're being done this. I mean, I remember when my firstborn was born. I shouldn't be saying this here, but anyway, that I had I saw divinity in him when he was born.
Yes.
I loved him fully with my heart and everything else. And that's when a certain aspect of you that is about to die, that's because you have now responsibilities.
Yes.
You have this, you have that to do, and you kind of feel that your freedom is being lost. It's a change. Having a child is a change of life. You're never going to be the same after that. And so there's an aspect of yourself that dies, and the only way he's going to survive is if my son wouldn't exist, right?
Right.
So I had to realize where this is coming from before I could liquidate him.
Well, that maturation process that you just described is one that I think that, we've had many times discussions, I'm sure you have with young men, and I have had with young men and even young women, but I've said to young men, now listen, you have to understand something, that when you get married, that's going to change your relationship. But at the same time, you can still get out of that. But when you have children, that moment that you have a child, things have changed permanently.
Yep.
And that your responsibility to that child. So make sure you understand that your life will change in a way that you can't really conceive of it right now, but that what it has to do with a restriction on your freedom because of your now responsibility. You have to mature and grow as a person. So don't rush into this.
Yeah.
And don't do it foolishly. Don't ignore that responsibility either. We see a lot of young men and young women having children out of wedlock and without being responsible towards themselves or their children. And I mean, that's, part of the Kali Yuga maybe, but at the same time, that part of you that says, oh man, everything's changed. And it's like, well, yeah, boom. Yeah. You're not a kid anymore.
That's right.
And that can be a very difficult emotionally, that psychologically, well, it's emotional is what we mean, because it's not a mental, it's an emotional thing.
Yeah.
It can be very difficult. And alchemy and metaphysical practices actually accentuate or intensify these experiences rather than diminish them.
Absolutely. And it was then that I was plunged into the dark night.
Mm-hmm.
It lasted with me for about almost a year. It was because part of something in me was dying. It had died, right. And that's it. And I had to accept that. And I actually went through the dying process of it. part of me died. But that's fine, because after that I was reborn. You know,
Yeah.
New energy found, you know, and
But you're an adult then. You feel
Yeah.
feel that an adulting, to
Yeah.
use that phrase, takes place.
yeah,
You're
it's great.
you feel responsible, and you are responsible.
And you start to enjoy that responsibility.
Yeah.
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 It's that again, and all that takes place both in the, whether it be in the laboratory aspect of the work to some degree, or in the internal psychological, psycho-spiritual, that blending of psychology and personal, we'll say personal psychology, and more transpersonal metaphysical energies, archetypes. All of that's taking place in us too when we're through our various practices. It forces us to grow up faster.
Oh yeah.
So the emotional highs and lows are higher and lower. I think people don't.
Oh, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. For sure. And feelings, you know, not just emotional, but actual physical feelings. From the overall exercises and the lighting up the chakras and all that, if I see somebody fall, I feel the pain, you know. I feel it, you know. Okay, we all get scared. That's exactly what we're doing, but all that is enhanced, you know. It's you become much more sensitive. You feel more. You're much more alive. That's what it is.
That's it, because we're dealing with whether it's breathing exercises in the body, like the overall, which for listeners who don't know, the overall exercise is something like the first exercise we used to get in AMORC. It's nothing more than a basic relaxation practice with breathing, but it is ignored at your own peril. It is a significant practice that is very simple, that has a tremendous effect on helping you to become more aware of just so many things, as we've hinted at here. Yes, it's simple and basic, but it is the foundation and should not be ignored. And it's in many practices. So that intensification of the energies of life, that alchemy or ritual magic or the yogas and tantras deal with, is something we need to remember. It's the energies of life and intensifying them within us.
Yeah. There is a passage, I forget where it comes from, where the queen, the alchemical queen, talks to you, and she says, if you drink of my virgin milk, I will make you alive with life itself. That's the Mercury, the feminine aspect of life. Yeah, it's a profound philosophy for sure. And I could see in alchemy it's the foundation of all religions, all philosophies, all psychologies. It's the very beginning.
Now, you've had some tremendous experiences again with philosophers of nature, with Junius, with AMORC, even in your Masonic encounters. You've provided a tremendous amount of information for people online that they can use, and some suggestions here to help them. What else about any aspect of your journey or your path would you like to share that you think is important for people to kind of reflect upon, maybe for their own work?
Well, as I said, I mentioned Jungian psychology, mythology, the Bible, the Genesis especially, you know. I mentioned Uspensky.
Well, you found that Julius Evela's book on the Hermetic tradition to be very important, and I have to tell you, so have I. And I found his works, the 3-volume set on Introduction to Magic that Jocelyn Godwin translated, and Jocelyn and I have talked about that at some length at different points. The value in those works. Maybe you could comment on what it is about Evela's work, particularly the Hermetic tradition, that you find useful or important.
Well, it's his manner of explaining the Hermetic passages. in such a way that he uplifts you, and he compares it with other passages. And he lays out the alchemical process clearly for you. He goes through the black stage, the white stage, and the red stage so beautifully, the conjunction and everything else, so poetically. He begins with the concepts, with the first concepts, the sun and the moon, man, woman, the meaning of woman. For example, woman is always referred to as the passive energy.
Mm-hmm.
Not because she is passive, she could be very active. You see cartoons where the woman is running after the man with the rolling pin, right? It's not necessarily passive, but it's that for the soul, soul is the Lord, the body is the woman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's what the Hermetists meant, and this is, many haven't thought about it. I was able to decipher this meaning. When Jesus resurrected,
Mm-hmm.
and Mary Magdalene found him,
Yes.
and she was going to touch him, remember?
Yes.
And he says, touch me not, woman.
Mm-hmm.
I have not yet ascended to the Father.
Yes.
Now, it's not because it was really Magdalene. This is an allegory. It's that he was able to separate out of his body. The spiritual body was there. He was next to ascend to God the Father. But the body was crying for the return of the soul. Because to the body, the soul is the Lord. Is the Lord. And I know from my astral projections myself, as soon as I think of the body,
Right. Yes.
I'm back together, or if I hear a noise, I'm back together, or if fly lands on my nose, I become conscious of my body, bam, I'm back together.
And we've all had that. We all know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is that meaning when Jesus said, touch me not yet, woman. Body, shut up, go away, go back to your cave there, leave me alone.
Uh-huh.
I gotta ascend. I'll come back. That's what he meant, and this is why a lot of people say that his writings are controversial because of that. But they're not to a true hermetist and a true alchemist. They understand what he meant by woman. It's the passive energy in man. It's usually, and Junius explains it very well, the lying down line and the upstanding line, the active line and the passive line. And that's what forms the cross, actually, the salt and all that. So that's where Junius has led me to understand really the Hermetic literatures in their purest sense. But it's his explanation of the black stage, the dying, the putrefaction, and he references all the alchemical writings, and then step by step, and then he goes into the white stage. Oh, so beautifully written. So I was able to write a poem on that. I am anima, talking about because the woman also, it's like we're a spirit, soul, and body. So the woman also can be also a woman on the spiritual level. The spirit, for example, the queen, the alchemical queen. The unconscious also is a woman, because that is passive. Passive in the sense that the active, the sun consciousness, can inseminate the unconscious.
Yes.
Send a message into there, or plant a seed thought, and then the unconscious becomes pregnant. So she's the woman. And then it will flourish when the right time comes, when its time has come, it matured and everything, it will manifest. It will manifest in the physical plane. Something will happen, some contact will be made, something will occur, and it'll manifest. So these are the kind of things that I love about the Hermetic tradition. It's really beautiful. Actually, that's the Rosicrucian AMORC principle too, where we visualize a thought,
Yes.
and we send it into, we say, into the cosmic, I release this thought. And then we're not supposed to think about it anymore because we're supposed to release it and it goes into the unconscious. But
And that fundamental idea, as many are aware of, is the entire foundation of New Thought. It's the entire foundation of many of the principles of Ashtanga Yoga, 8-limb yoga, Raja Yoga, as it's called. And again, within auto-hypnosis, sometimes called self-suggestion, whatever we want to call it, by whatever name, this notion that we can create a vital idea so clearly and precisely, and that we can then place ourselves in a condition that we're no longer concerned with it, and that it takes on a life of its own through our trust and confidence in the practice. We have to trust the practice. Agrippa is quite clear of this. Agrippa says very clearly, any idea or thought clearly visualized will manifest. In all of psychosynthesis, Oz and Joey talks extensively about that. Thoughts will eventually manifest, but that we have to have confidence and faith in that capacity. Otherwise, we undermine it. It will be aborted if we don't.
And we have to forget it. Once we made the thought, as much as possible, don't think about it anymore. Many things happened to me after I completely forgot about it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
I noticed something too, is being grateful, that the more gratitude we have towards small things, such as for myself, when I need to find something and I'm looking for something I've lost, that after I have found it, because often we're in a hurry when that's happening,
yeah,
just pause for a second or two and tell your inner self, thank you.
yeah,
Because we have to build that feedback loop of appreciation.
yes.
Because it's like, you know what I'm talking about. I just want to reinforce
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, because it creates a bond, it creates a passage between you and the unconscious mind. I know exactly what you mean, because sometimes, like an example you gave, looking for something. I was supposed to pick up my mother after I come home from work, from where she was working, and I'm going, I completely forgot about picking her up. And just about as I ready to pass the street where I'm supposed to turn off, boom, out of nowhere, hey, your mother.
Yeah.
You know, where did this come from? I know I wasn't thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
It just bang, opened up. At times like that, I always say, oh, thank you for reminding me, you know. So that creates a bond. Like,
well, this also shifts our attitude. And I'll just share something with you, because I want our listeners, our viewers, to hear this. You know, yesterday, I had some things going on. I'm trying to get a hold of my wife. My one son needs to be picked up, but it's easier for her to pick him up if we can get a hold of her. It's not happening. Finally, I get in my car and I'm driving to get him. My wife calls me, and she's at a point where she can just turn around. She's only 2 blocks away. She can go back and get him. It's not a problem. I'm only 2 blocks from my house, so I haven't driven that far. I can just turn around and go right back. And it was just, instead of like being angry about the situation, like, why don't you pick up your phone? Why don't it's like, oh, great. Thank you very, great. You'd be grateful that it worked out. Everything worked out. And I think sometimes we have to look at our situations in life and just be grateful that, hey, this was great. Everything worked out. I got exactly what I needed. My son got what he needed. My wife got what she needed, because I was making dinner. I didn't have to, I had to go back and, make sure that the dinner was just right, instead of leaving it. So in my mind, this is perfect. Everything worked out. And gratitude is such a critical part of this process. And maybe you could comment on that, because alchemy there's so many challenges, and we have to be so grateful when we get those successes.
Yeah, of course. Well, like I said, it creates a bond between the unconscious and you, between your divine self and your outer self. So there has to be a communication. There has to be a friendship, a love between the two. And by thanking and by appreciating, it will respond more to you, you know. But if you're unresponsive,
Mhm.
you know, then it tends to be at a minimal stage, you know. But if you become responsive, thank it grows, it becomes stronger. There's much more of a communion, there's much more of a communication between the two. And well, that goes also with prayer, right? For example, for me, Psalm 23 is a direct communication with my higher self.
Mhm.
If you meditate on every word in Psalm 23, it is such an energetic, suggestive invocation type, you know. So that too, when you say that, you send it on to him, he responds to you in the same way, with everything that you have just said in the prayer, on so many levels in your life, you know. There's not a day that I don't say that prayer, because it just energizes me, you know. First of all, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Okay, I shall not want. I got everything I need,
Mhm.
right? He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. Well, if he's my shepherd, I'm the sheep, right? What else does a sheep want but green pastures, right? He was making me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters, not stormy waters, not muddy waters, so still waters, nice and calm. Peace, okay, that's what that is, peace and calm and safety. He restoreth my soul. Well, that is very powerful for me. He restoreth my soul, because it just energizes you. And the next line is what really saved me one time. That's how I got introduced to this prayer. I was in my dark night, and I felt very evil, very, very, you know, not worthy of anything. You know, it's a very bad feeling when you're like that. And that line says, "He leadeth me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake." Well, holy mackerel, that just rang a bell in me. Bang. I'm not that evil, because he's going to lead me in the right path for his name's sake. So what does this mean? His name's sake. He wants to remain my God. He doesn't want to let me fall off the path. He's going to make sure I'm on the right path, you know? And when I realized that, oh, a burden just fell off me. Boom, boom, boom. I felt light again. And that, when I realized that, then I repeated that prayer about 10 times that day. And then it says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." All right, so even in death, but it's not physical death, death can be anything, right? The dark night is a death. Any such event is like a death. Fear no evil. His rod is with you and his staff is with you. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of my enemies. So I was wondering about, what the heck is this, a table? What, I'm going to set a table for my enemies? Well, what does this mean? So I looked up different meanings for the word table, and one of the meanings for a table was that in the ancient times, when a king or a general ordered 3 tables over here, 3 tables over there, 2 tables over here, and I want a couple tables over there, they were a row of soldiers with shields. That was called a table. So thou prepares the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. So he's shielding me, he's protecting me. Thou anointest my head with oil. Well, to be anointed by oil, you were his chosen one. There's another passage from another psalm that says, "Do not touch my anointed ones, you know, because I'll destroy you," or something like that. So you're his chosen one. I anoint my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Well, I always visualize that when I say that as a beautiful chalice with clear water flowing in and overflowing, water of life. Goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So that's such an energizing prayer. And you know what? My son was in, one of my sons, the younger one, well, he's 38 years old, but he's one, there was a dumbass teacher when he was in high school that convinced him that God doesn't exist,
Yeah, I know a few of those. I got to deal with that too.
But he's convinced. He's like that. He's not spiritual at all. I can't talk to him so much about this because he just yeah. So when he's in trouble, I repeat this psalm for him.
Yes.
Instead of saying the Lord is my shepherd, I would say the Lord is his shepherd. He shall.
Yes.
I do it that way. And do you know it works?
Yes.
The magic transfers to him through our unconscious, which is connected with the collective unconscious, right? And it travels through, and there is a connection. This is this is pure magic. This is true magic, So I thought I'd share that.
Well, I'm glad you did, because it's important. It's really important that listeners hear these real life encounters, these real experiences, that we share them to encourage them to know that we as well go through these difficult times. This is part of the path. It's okay. And that we come face to face with parts of ourselves we didn't even know existed or preferred didn't, but we have done it. We'll probably do it again. You will do it, and it's okay. And that in these times of crisis, you will find a prayer or something that will help you. I know the 23rd Psalm was particularly fond of by my great uncle, who of course joined AMORC in the 20s, the late 1920s. And I have his materials and letters from Harvey Lewis. And that psalm was an important one, and it's important in magical operations. So those who are studying Martinism or any of the French or even German magical practices, feel free to look up the 23rd Psalm in magic, and you'll see that it's a very important psalm. So I'll just give you my insight. Before I studied theology, and got a degree, and so I had always thought that the phrase he established a table before me in the presence of my enemies, I kind of thought, well, maybe he's saying like it's like showing off, like this, here, this is the table, whatever you guys, it doesn't matter, you're powerless against him, but both of them work. I'm going to look that up again, the notion of the various meanings of the word table. And that's part of the whole alchemical process in the language of the birds, the green language of what are the multiple meanings of words. I know we're getting near the end of our time, but we got another 15 minutes left. Maybe I could ask you a little bit about just what are your thoughts on Fulcanelli?
Well, of course, the writings by Fulcanelli are beautiful. I mean, I've read Le Mystère de Cathédrale, the Mysteries of the Cathedrals, and I have his other book, the Philosophers, the Dwellings of the Philosophers. I read them both. Very beautiful writings. But there's a controversy about him, right? As to his true identity. And the other thing is that it is said that his writings are collected works of various other authors. Now, what is interesting also is this, that Flamel's writings are also said to be collected works of others. It wasn't just him, Now, Flamel's name is Flam El. Flame El. El being the divine in the Jewish, El. Right. Divine fire. Flam El.
Hmm.
Fulcanelli comes from the word Vulcan, which is fire also. Fulcanelli is again the EL abbreviation of God,
Hmm.
fire of God. Both have the same names. So this is something interesting to ponder on. I read where Schwaller de Lubitsch,
Hmm.
he himself wrote that the mysteries of the cathedrals, he had actually written it.
I remember reading that. Yes.
He had actually written it, and that it was stolen from him and somehow ended up under the pseudonym of Fulcanelli. I don't think Fulcanelli existed as such as one man, you know. And Cancelier, the alchemist Cancelier, called him his master. I don't think that he ever had Fulcanelli as a physical master in front of him. I think he called him as a master to his writings, just like I call these five
Yes.
masters my masters. So that's my take on it. But the writings are beautiful, you know, fantastic, especially the Mystère de Cathédrale. That's, you know, I wanted to go see the Notre Dame de Paris, and then now it's burnt down. Jesus.
No.
And that was a catastrophe and a half. I hope that's not an omen, but it seems to be an omen.
I think it's difficult, you know, when and I've had this conversation often. I know we've talked about it privately, and I have with many others privately. It's that we see so many people who would like to discuss this notion of the doctrine of signatures, the doctrine of correspondences, the law of cycles, astrology, and yet somehow when a catastrophe like Notre Dame takes place, oh, it's just a fire.
Yeah.
Well, you know, wait a minute. You've spent all this time saying that there's no such thing as a coincidence. There's no such thing as a pure accident. That, I mean, of course, there's cause and effect. We understand karma can have some peculiarities to it. Not everything has deep meaning, but everything has a cause, an effect. But when something as spectacular as Notre Dame,
Yeah, something that took 20 years, 200 years to build.
Right.
Can you imagine?
And you're going to say there's no metaphysical meaning behind that. It's just a fire. And I see that happen quite a bit in modern occultists not really willing to apply those principles. They keep them abstract, they keep them theoretical. And it's only in that application in the laboratory, in ritual magic, and in the perception of the world around you and the events around you that magic, that alchemy is able to take place. I saw the burning of Notre Dame as a catastrophic signal, as a catastrophic omen.
Me too, absolutely. And we can see it. We can see with who the Pope is right now. We can see how the Catholic Church is absolutely not protecting itself at all. It's letting itself, so much is coming out, it isn't funny. In schools, what they teach in schools now shows it, you know. Christianity is, you know, you're like a vampire if you're a Christian. So,
well, and you know, just maybe this is a good jumping off point because, of course, we have looked at the Book of Revelations on many levels. We've looked at it as alchemically, we've looked at it initiatically. Of course, many people look at it prophetically, and Jean Dubuis himself said that the changing of the cycles, whenever that would be. I mean, his time frame was kind of loose. You know, it wasn't he wasn't precise, but you know, he said, and hesitantly, and there was this great hesitation, if you remember, when he would talk about it, because you don't want to say something, because of course he understands the power of the word. He's not trying to materialize it, but he's trying to give us a warning at the same time.
Yeah,
How do we do that? He said, it's going to be a rough time.
yeah. And we are in a rough time.
Yeah.
But this COVID and everything, there's so much deception, so much lies, so much wanting to control, so much wanting to actually enslave humanity.
Hmm.
The actual wanting to depopulate, we read so much about it. There's something very sinister happening, but I have faith that the good shall win. I personally believe that we are right now living in the time of the Armageddon. Which side's going to win now? That's how it's going to be.
I had a very prominent lama just less than 3 months ago say, the Tibetan prophecy on the Kali Yuga is very simple, that the decisions are going to be made now that will decide the next 1,000 years. Is it 1,000 years of light or 1,000 years of darkness? And we've tried to get this through to people, and it's amazing the level of rejection.
Yep.
And that this I just can't say that enough to you. That the future is not set. It's not guaranteed what direction it will go in.
Absolutely. It's like George Orwell said. He said, if the New World Order wins, it'll be like a hard boot on the face of humanity for 1,000 years, or forever, I think he said. Something like that. So we're living in a very critical time, as you say, and that's why I say this is the Armageddon.
Right.
This is literally the forces of good and evil. To forcibly inject stuff in you, and I know that some of our viewers probably don't believe all this, and it's a controversial thing. I understand, but it's all coming out now. It's all coming out. Fetal cells and stuff like that they're injecting in us, So this is demonic. I don't care what anybody says. For me, it's demonic.
Well, and of course, the nature here is, what is freedom? Freedom and responsibility. And how do we balance these out? And as initiates, we're constantly aiming towards more and more freedom. But that freedom also, as that awakening occurs, will make us responsible. What we see is a tremendous emphasis on obedience, and that is counter-initiatic. And that we have to face that reality. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Well,
yeah,
I think that's something I think it's an important point to end on, because that symbolism that we've talked about as a personal initiation, as a collective initiation, as an alchemical path or process, in some ways, maybe, I won't say it is, but maybe unfolding around us right now. So I think this is an important point to end, and encourage our listeners to really think about these points that we've talked about, and how is their path going to help them, help their children, help their grandchildren into the future? Because if we truly believe in reincarnation, what kind of world are we coming back to? How are we going to have access to these teachings in the future? Where will they come from if we ourselves now don't take the responsibility of guaranteeing them for ourselves in the future?
Right. And the other scary thing is it's this AI. Robots implanting stuff in our head, transhumanism. This is all. This is not just. This is in the works. They have plans for all this.
I know people who work on it, and I remember years ago mentioning it, and I was told, "Oh no, don't worry, it's not that big of a deal." But when I talk to people who work on it now, they're like, "Well, this is
a big deal.
This is a big deal."
I heard one guy working on it said, "Free will is over. There is no more free will like that. It's finished. It's gone once this comes in."
Well, and that's a critical point, because free will choice is what makes us human, which makes us spiritual beings. that even if we make the worst of mistakes, as you said, through that 23rd Psalm, that our spiritual path, our inner self, our God, whatever it is going to be there for us if we call upon it repeatedly over and over again and get that relationship going. But if we don't believe in it, if we have people telling us spirituality is nonsense, and then the degrading of our free will, then I'll use the word counter-initiatic. You've used the word demonic, but really they're the same thing. We're saying the same word. So we know the path. I know it's time now, but we've got to end. I just want to say thank you so very much for taking time out of your special day, the first day of spring, to initiate our viewers into spagyrics, into alchemy, and to have this time. So I just want to say thank you very much.
It was my pleasure, and I think it was befitting being first day of spring. So how's one? Well, look at the eggs. The eggs are all floating.
Let's see. What do they look like? They're all floating. That's great.
It seems like the reaction stopped. Oh, well, no more bubbly. This was quick. Of course, I did it before once with oyster shells. It took a longer time.
Ah, yes. Yeah, I've done that as well. Yes.
You did, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So it was nice having you.
Well, thank you.
Visit
And-
me.
And stay on just for a second after we pause. And let's say goodbye to our listeners.